Welcome to the Lost Method, where history is explained through the systems that shaped it. In the late 19th century, the global balance of power was brutally simple. Industrialized Western states dominated. Non-industrial societies were conquered, coerced, or carved apart. India was ruled by Britain, Indochina by France, Indonesia by the Dutch. Much of Africa was partitioned almost overnight. China, once the center of East Asian civilization, was forced into humiliating treaties and divided into foreign spheres of influence. And yet Japan, an isolated island nation with no modern army, no industrial economy, and a feudal political system, avoided colonization entirely. Not only that, within 50 years, Japan defeated China, defeated Russia, and emerged as an imperial power in its own right. This raises a fundamental historical question. How did Japan modernize without being colonized when so many others failed? In 1853, Japan was not a rising power. It was governed by the Tokugawa shogunate, a military regime that had ruled for over 2 centuries. Japanese society was rigidly hierarchical. Samurai stood at the top, followed by peasants, artisans, and merchants. Foreign trade was severely restricted. Christianity was banned. Western technology was limited to a handful of controlled contacts with Dutch traders. This system had preserved stability, but at a cost. Japan was politically fragmented, economically underdeveloped, and militarily outdated. Then, in July 1853, 4 American warships sailed into Edo Bay. They were powered by steam, armed with modern cannons, and backed by a government that had already forced its way into China. The American commander delivered a message. Japan must open its ports to trade, or face force. Japan had no realistic way to resist. The arrival of these ships shattered a long-held illusion that isolation equaled safety. Japanese leaders watched what had happened to China during the Opium Wars. They saw how technological inferiority translated into political humiliation. And they reached a grim conclusion. If Japan did not change, it would share China's fate. This realization created something rare in history, a shared sense of existential urgency. Reform was no longer an abstract debate about tradition versus progress. It became a question of survival. But Japan's response was unusual. Unlike France in 1789 or Russia in 1917, modernization in Japan did not begin with mass revolution. It began with elite consensus. Samurai leaders, court nobles, and powerful regional lords disagreed on many issues, but they agreed on one fundamental point. The Tokugawa system could not protect Japan. Over the next decade, opposition to the shogunate grew, not because it was oppressive in the modern sense, but because it was ineffective. In 1868, the Tokugawa shogunate was removed from power, and authority was restored to the emperor. This event became known as the Meiji Restoration. Despite its name, it was not a return to ancient tradition. It was a political revolution, carefully managed from above. Power was centralized. Rival domains were dismantled. The emperor became a symbol of national unity, while real authority was exercised by a small group of reformist elites. This centralization mattered. It allowed Japan to do something many societies could not: implement sweeping reforms quickly and consistently. Japan's leaders then faced a critical decision. How should modernization occur? Many societies confronted with Western power responded defensively. Some tried to preserve tradition by rejecting foreign influence. Others accepted Western control in exchange for limited reform. Japan chose a third path. It would study the West aggressively, but remain politically independent. Japanese missions were sent to Europe and North America. They studied constitutions, legal systems, factories, railways, schools, and armies. Nothing was off limits, but Japan did not copy blindly. Instead, it practiced selective adaptation. British naval organization was adopted because Britain dominated the seas. German military structure was chosen for its discipline and efficiency. Western legal codes were studied but reshaped to fit Japanese authority. What Japan imported was not Western culture, but Western capacity. Technology was a tool. The state remained Japanese. This distinction was crucial. In colonized societies, modernization served imperial interests. In Japan, modernization served national survival. One of the most important differences between Japan and colonized regions was who controlled economic change. In many parts of Asia and Africa, infrastructure was built to extract resources. Railways connected mines to ports, not cities to each other. Factories served foreign markets. In Japan, the state led development for domestic purposes. The Meiji government invested heavily in infrastructure. Railways were constructed, shipyards were built, textile mills, arsenals, and communication networks followed. To fund this transformation, the government reformed taxation, replacing feudal obligations with a modern tax system. Education was made national and compulsory. Literacy expanded rapidly. A new generation of engineers, administrators, and officers emerged. Once industries became profitable, many were sold to private Japanese families. This created powerful industrial groups, but ownership remained domestic. Japan industrialized without surrendering control of its economy. That alone set it apart from most of the non-Western world. Military reform was equally decisive. Japan's leaders understood that modernization without military power was meaningless. China had attempted reform, but remained vulnerable. India had modern infrastructure, but no political sovereignty. Japan abolished the samurai class, ending centuries of hereditary military privilege. In its place, universal conscription was introduced. This was a radical move. It dismantled the social order, angered traditional elites, and provoked rebellions. But it created something new, a national army. The military was trained, standardized, and equipped along modern lines. The Navy, modeled on British principles, expanded rapidly. These reforms were not theoretical. In 1894, Japan went to war with China. Within a year, China was defeated. A decade later, Japan fought Russia, one of Europe's great powers. Against expectations, Japan won again. For the first time in modern history, an Asian state had defeated a European empire. The consequences were enormous. Japan was no longer a target for colonization. It was recognized as a major power. So why did Japan succeed where others failed? The answer lies not in culture or geography, but in timing, leadership, and control. Japan reformed early, before foreign domination became irreversible. It centralized authority, allowing decisions to be made and enforced. And it controlled modernization internally. Ensuring reform served national interests, not foreign ones. In contrast, China's reforms were delayed and resisted by entrenched elites. Authority was fragmented between court factions, regional leaders, and foreign powers. In India, modernization occurred, but under colonial rule. Decisions were made in London, not Delhi. In many societies, reform came too late, without unity, or without sovereignty. Japan avoided these traps, but this success came with consequences. Centralization strengthened authoritarian tendencies. Military power encouraged expansion. Economic pressure pushed Japan outward in search of resources. The same system that protected Japan from colonization later drove imperial ambition. By the early 20th century, Japan was no longer resisting empire. It was building one. This contradiction sits at the heart of modern Japanese history. Modernization brought strength, but also instability. Japan's experience shows us something uncomfortable. Modernization is not simply about adopting technology. It is about who controls change, how quickly decisions are made, and whether survival is prioritized over tradition. Japan modernized without being colonized because it acted decisively, early, and on its own terms. Others did not, and history judged them differently. So the real question is not whether Japan learned from the West. It is whether the rest of the world underestimated how quickly systems must change when survival is on the line.